Good morning. This is Deborah Arca with the Pathos Book Club. And today I have with me John Geiger, who is the author of a brand new book called The Angel Effect. We Are Never Alone. John is the CEO of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. He's also the best-selling author of a book called The Third Man Factor, Surviving the Impossible, as well as four other books of nonfiction. Your latest book, The Angel Effect, We Are Not Alone, it's just been released, and it is really extraordinary. It is a collection of stories of people, ordinary people, who have been in some experience where they have sensed a presence, a guardian angel, some people have called them, a divine intervention that has aided them and in many cases guided them to safety in times of extreme danger or desperation. You've documented hundreds of stories by people who have had this experience. Tell us about this experience and kind of the common qualities that they contain.
Well, essentially, it's the sense that there's another being with you. There's a presence, a very powerful, benevolent presence that's joined you and is there as your best friend. It's there to guide you, to help you cope with terrible stress, often life and death situations. So it's a very, very powerful experience for people who've had it. And I came across it when doing some research related to my day job, as you say, in exploration. And I found the case of Sir Ernest Shackleton, the great Antarctic explorer, and Charles Lindbergh, the great American aviator, both of whom described having a sense of an unseen being intervening to help them during critical times, life and death struggles. During their exploration. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. It's happened to astronauts, it's happened to solo sailors, shipwreck survivors, Antarctic explorers, Everest climbers, this whole group of people. And so that was the subject of my last book, The Third Man Factor, is how this amazing phenomenon of an unseen being intervening has aided people in these extreme situations. But what struck me after that book came out is that this has happened to many other people. You don't have to be an explorer. You don't have to be on Everest to have this happen. In fact, hundreds of people contacted me to say that this has happened to them, and it happened in their living room. It happened when they were in hospital. It happened after a car accident. So it's not something that requires an extreme environment in the sense that you're at the South Pole. This can happen anywhere to people, and it does happen.
And it's not necessarily happening to people of faith necessarily. I mean, you might think, oh, well, people that are, Christian, believe in angels and believe that this is God's presence. But you're saying that this happens across the board, people of faith and no faith.
Well, that's what's interesting to me is that it certainly does happen to people of faith, and they will attribute it when it does happen to a religious experience of some sort. It will be an angel, it will be Christ, it will be God. They'll assign religious explanation to it. Mm-hmm. But the thing that interests me is that this also happens to people who are not at all religious, people who are agnostic, outright atheists, people who have absolutely no belief beyond, I guess, the religion of science. Mm-hmm. So those people will also describe this experience, and they interpret it differently. They see it as not a religious experience or anything spiritual, but they see it as somehow something internal to their brain, helping them during a critical moment, reaching out, or they'll find another way of explaining the phenomenon.
Yeah, so give us some examples of some of these stories. There's some kind of famous ones. For instance, I can't remember if it was in your last book or this book about the last man out of the of one of the towers during 9/11.
Yes. So Ron DeFrancesco is a money market trader working in the South Tower of the World Trade Center, just going about his everyday routine. Had, of course, after the plane hit, like many other people, found himself trapped above the impact zone in the tower. And Ron was essentially trapped, and he was in a stairwell with others. People were actually succumbing to the smoke in that stairwell. He felt that he was trapped. They felt that they were trapped. He sort of slumped down right above the impact zone, and he felt that perhaps his life was over, that his fight was over. There's no way that he could get out. And he felt what he described as an angel intervene. He suddenly felt this presence very powerfully, and a voice spoke to him and said, "Ron, get up. You can get out of this. You can survive this." And he actually felt that he was physically directed down into a place that people wouldn't normally want to go, and that is into the fire. So he fought his way through debris, through flames, and emerged on the other end of this, several floors of debris and flames, in a normal stairwell. In a sense, it was lit, and he was able to get down and get out just as the building collapsed. So when I was working on the Third Man Factor, his story really struck me, because here was a guy who was not, again, on this, summiting Everest. He was just going to work, and suddenly he found himself in this incredibly stressful, horrific, unbelievable situation, and he survived because of one of these experiences, an intervention by what he called an angel. And then other people started to contact me, and they brought similar stories. One guy was surfing, and a great white shark attacked him, and he was able to fend it off, and he felt, again, an angel had intervened to save his life. And there are examples of plane crashes. There's a wonderful woman in the book who has a terrible a virulent form of brain cancer, and she felt, when she was in the hospital, a presence that calmed her and gave her a sense of great courage. Again, there's so many cases, so many examples of people who are depressed, people who have been battling alcoholism. There's one gentleman who, had been a terrible alcoholic. He'd been fighting alcoholism for years. He was in danger of losing his family. He had already lost his job. He was in danger of losing his life. And he was sitting again in his living room and suddenly felt a presence there. And the presence basically said to him, if you have one more drink, you will die. And that intervention by an unseen being, caused him to stop drinking. And he's completely reformed and turned his life around. He's incredible, dynamic, healthy, articulate guy. You'd never know he had gone through this terrible fight.
So one of the things you say that you find most interesting is how shockingly common these experiences are. And I don't know, that surprised me a little bit, because I think about that these are the exceptions, people that are visited by an angel in a life-threatening situation. But you said they're actually really common, and truly, as you read the book, you realize they are. So you've got all these stories that are really different. I mean, car crashes, but then somebody dealing with alcoholism, your own personal experience that you share at the beginning of the book of just being comforted by a presence after the death of your child. And so they're really varied in their particularities. And yet there's these commonalities in what happens. That there's a felt presence. Sometimes it's even physical. People talk about they feel a warmth on their hand, or it's that close, and it's always benevolent, and it's guiding, it's authoritative, and they often have this sense. I mean, almost all of the stories have this sense that they've never felt so at peace and so comforted in their lives. So they're extremely powerful, life-changing in most cases for people. And yet, how do we explain these? So, you've got the scientists and the neurologists that are going to rush in and say, well, of course, when you're under extreme stress, these different things happen to your brain and your body. Okay, so we have to talk about that. So tell us a little bit about how this is explained from the scientific point of view, and then we can kind of go back to, but what's missing in that, in those explanations.
Sure. Well, I mean, as you say, there are a variety of explanations. None of them is definitive. None of them is widely accepted in the scientific community, because there's not enough evidence yet to support any of these as being kind of a definitive explanation of what's going on. Excuse me. But so a number of the psychological explanations relate to a coping mechanism. This is simply you talking to yourself and coping with a very severe situation. We're such a social species that we kind of always crave companionship, crave human comfort. So when you're in a situation where you feel alone, even if you're not necessarily alone, but you feel alone and you feel sort of helpless, that you sort of call upon another part of you to assist you through that trial. So that's one of the psychological explanations that's floating around out there. There are others as well. There's the whole idea of the bicameral mind. That we have a sort of the God brain, the right hemisphere talking to the other hemisphere of our brain, and it's being read by us as a distinct entity that's separate from ourselves, but really all it is one hemisphere talking to the other. So that's another theory. And then in terms of neurological theories, there are a whole variety of them, and you really have to read the book to understand the full, just how many there are and how different they are. But what's interesting is that none of these experiences explain the benevolence of this. None of these theories properly explain the benevolence of the experience. And the fact that people will describe things that you mentioned, for example, a hand holding their hand, a sense of being helped up or guided in a specific direction, a sense that people have that they're actually given specific instructions that really they would never have thought of, they were in no condition to have thought of, as to how to get out of the situation that they're in. So very, it's not just that they sense something there, but they're actually receiving communications and specific directions.
Right, yes. So all of these people that have had these experiences, they really aren't concerned with the scientific explanation. So what do you make of that? That it doesn't really seem to matter for them whether it's proven or not. I mean, it was for them a life-changing experience.
Well, I think that's ultimately the most important message here, is that this experience is real.
Yeah.
It's lived. People are having this experience. They're not making it up. These are very rational people. They're very accomplished people in many cases. They're people from a whole variety of backgrounds. They're not people who are inventing this. In fact, in my mind, they're very courageous people, because they've come forward with an experience that some people might think is a little bit strange, a little bit out there, and they've decided to stand behind it and share what happened to them. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how you analyze what happened. I mean, it's okay if you think that it's a scientific neurological response to stress. That's okay, and it's okay if you think that it's an angel. What matters is it happened. It's profoundly powerful. It did save your life, and that's enough.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important realization. We have this need to kind of rationalize everything that happens, explain scientifically everything that happens. So far, no one has been able to explain scientifically what's going on in this situation. Their experience, and when people describe it as an angel experience, at the end of the day, if it walks like an angel and talks like an angel, maybe it's an angel. Maybe that's the explanation we're looking for.
What was the process like for you of receiving these stories? What did you notice happening within yourself as you kind of heard story after story about these experiences?
Well, I like to think of myself as quite a rational person.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's obviously going to be a simple explanation. There's going to be an explanation. And I began to investigate the phenomenon. I spoke to all sorts of experts, and I realized, actually, there isn't an explanation. There is no explanation. Now, that's not to say that one day there won't be an explanation. We don't know where the research will end up. We're just starting to understand the way the brain operates. But as far as I can tell, there isn't an acceptable theory as to what's happening to people. There's just a number of theories, and none of them is quite satisfactory. And then there's another possibility, and that is that people are actually experiencing some sort of communication with another being, an angelic entity, something touching something divine, and that maybe is a maybe that's the explanation we're looking for. So I think that for me was a real journey, going from the belief at the outset that there'd be a very rationalistic, kind of naturalistic explanation for what's going on, and ending up with the idea that, well, maybe there's not, and maybe there is something much more profound here than that could easily dealt with in a description of human brain responses to to stress.
Are you still collecting stories? If people have stories they want to share?
There's a lot of people are still contacting me, and the website, which is angel-effect.com or thirdmanfactor.com,
Okay.
takes you to the same site. Now, there's a forum there, and people are joining the forum and participating in a conversation about this. So I am still interested. I think that this is a very, very important part of our lives that has been poorly understood. I think that it's either proof of the existence of angels, or it's proof that something that resembles angels is accessible to any one of us in our moment of greatest need. And I think that's a pretty profound observation. And so I think that we should be talking about this a lot more than we are.
Great. Well, thank you.